how long have you known about the movie and them planning to make it? And what do you think about them finally being able to release it now? It's going to release around the same time we air this story. What are your thoughts about it finally coming to fruition?
Well, the first I heard about the movie was in 1999 when I met the writer-director Todd Robinson. Todd was doing a story on Air Force Pararescue, and he'd visited several pararescue sections around the States. And he kept hearing about Bill Pitsenberger and the Vietnam mission, and that he ought to do a story or a movie on Pitsenberger. So he started doing some research on what happened that day in April 1966. And he was invited to go to the Pararescue School in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is our basic school for all pararescue. And he heard about the story then, and kind of after he put all the pieces together, decided that it would make a good movie. He also met several other pararescuemen that are involved in Mogadishu and in Somalia, in the Balkan Wars. And he got the idea then, and he was working on the movie for 20 years before he finally got it produced. Yeah. But I've been working with Todd kind of off and on all through those years as far as getting the information that I knew about the mission.
What does it mean to you when you watched that movie the first time and saw, actors playing your real life, what did that mean to you?
It was kind of mixed emotions. Actually, the actor William Hurt is playing me, but he's actually playing two of us. One of my teammates at Benoit, Vietnam, was Airman First Class Harry O'Byrne. And in my case, I was on the mission, but Harry was Bill's best friend, and Harry went in the next morning when they recovered the bodies and the wounded. So Harry and I have both been very active in trying to get the approval for the Medal of Honor, getting the information for it. So really, William Hurt is playing kind of combination of myself and Harry, not just myself alone. Right. But yeah, it's a little different having one of these famous Hollywood actors, and I've met and talked to Mr. Hurt at the recreation of the Medal of Honor ceremony. He's quite a guy, and a little flabbergasted that I'd have him playing my role.
So when you watched it, was it kind of surreal? Was it emotional? Did it bring back?
It was, again, this is not a documentary, it's a movie. So Todd and Sidney did the best they could to make it realistic as far as what really took place, but they were very limited. For instance, they couldn't get the helicopter that we used. They had to use a Huey that they borrowed for the filming and everything. So yeah, it was a real emotional high ride. I was sitting next to my mother-in-law, and I was trying not to shed tears, but she was sobbing so much that it finally brought tears to not my mother-in-law, but my daughter's mother-in-law.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty monumental, I imagine, in some ways. And I imagine there's some parts of the movie where you'd be like, oh, it's not exactly how it happened. But
well, no, but for instance, most of the background for the Medal of Honor, anytime you're trying to get a medal upgraded to the Medal of Honor from a lower medal, you have to meet certain criteria. You have to have a recommendation from somebody in the individual's chain of command. You have to have new evidence, and that's the hardest part. What new evidence could we get? And we knew Bill deserved the Medal of Honor all these years, but we didn't know how to go about getting new evidence. And it wasn't until the Air Force Sergeant Association did a study on Bill on a series they did on Air Force heroes, and one of their studies was on Bill Pitsenberger. And that started to get the interest going on getting new information, because they contacted some of these Army guys that survived the battle. And this was 1999. It's the first time we've been in contact with any of them. And that's what gave the impetus to getting the medal, this new information. And you have to have congressional support, and Congressman Boner of Ohio did a great job of pushing that through, along with Senator John McCain.
Tell me about the firefight and what was going on with Pitsenberger and his desire to risk his life at all costs.
Well, Pararescue exists for one purpose, and that is to save lives. And our pararescuemen, now they go through more than 2 years of training. And every bit of their training, the mountain climbing, the halo parachute jumping, the scuba diving, it's all orientated towards saving life. So we get drummed in us that, you know, our job is to save lives. And I've never met a pararescue man that wasn't willing to risk his life to save somebody else's, including going in sometimes when you knew your chances were very slim of getting back. They'll still push you ahead. These things we do that others may live. It's ingrained in us that we're there to save lives. And in Vietnam, that was so ingrained in us that, you know, we're young. I was 25, Bill was 21. We're invincible. Nothing's going to happen to us. We're flying this relatively safe helicopter. We had armor plating on the sides of it. We thought we had armor plating below us. We had self-sealing gas tanks, and we thought that they would stop any rounds. So the first time we got hit from below, the rounds went right through the helicopter like butter and out the top. We sat on our flak vests instead of wearing them on the rest of the flights. But, you know, we knew we could get shot down. We could get shot. We're shot at all the time, but felt we were invincible.
Your thoughts
we
about...
didn't worry about getting killed.
What did you think about what Bill did that day?
Well, again, a lot of mixed emotions because it should have been me down there. I was the low bird. He was the high bird. It was my job going first, but it didn't work out that way. But we just heard piecemeal about what happened, since, of course, we couldn't talk to him. And we had only contact with one of the Army survivors just briefly in the hospital. He was interviewed by the Air Force press. And he kind of related some of the stuff Bill had done, but we didn't know exactly what took place on that ground. Later on, we hear that, you know, the bullets are flying so thick. Imagine you got 500 guys shooting at you at one time. Machine guns, automatic rifles. You got 134 guys shooting out. The bullets are flying so thick that if you stuck your hand up, you'd lose your fingers just about. So all these Army guys were hugging the ground. We later heard that Bill was up and moving. Instead of just hugging the ground and shooting, he was crawling around. He's going out the perimeter. We heard a little bit about this from Fred Navarro, the sergeant that was in the hospital. He was dragging wounded back from the perimeter of this fight because the Army guys had formed a circle shooting outwards, very tight circle, but all four companies were shooting outwards. And as the fight progressed, Bill kind of encouraged some of these Army guys. Most of them were young recruits right out of school. A couple of them had only been over there 2 weeks before finding himself in the first time in the jungle and their first big battle. And Bill was encouraging them to get them fight. He, in dragging the wounded back, he also gathered ammunition because most of these young guys were just shooting full automatic and burning right through their ammo. He was gathering clips from the dead and redistributing them to the Army guys on the ground. He treated as many as he could. Again, we didn't know what was going on down there because I was up in the helicopter. And we tried, after Bill's helicopter went in for their third time, they got shot down. They actually got shot up so bad that they're able to, they had a fuel control valve hit that jammed their throttle full forward, full power. And they're sitting in this hole. The pilot lost a lot of his hydraulics. He was able to hold the helicopter steady by holding full right rudder, and he lifted up. He moved away. Now Bill's on the ground, and I'm with my helicopter back at Bimba, 5 miles away, unloading patients when this took place. We heard that they got hit, and the pilot decided to just land at a nearby clearing, but he was afraid to because it was unsecure, and he was still flying. So he said, I'll try for a road up ahead. He went for there and started to sit down. He's still flying. He said, I'll try to make it back to the Bimba, which is 5 miles. And the time we'd taken off and gone back, so we're escorting him. And they couldn't slow the helicopter down. So he made a full running landing at full speed, slammed into the ground, stopped. They couldn't shut the rotors down because the rotor brake was shot off. And the flight mechanic was able to shut the engine down by taking a hammer, climbing up on the outside and banging on the fuel control valve. But Bill's on the ground this whole time. So we went back and tried to get in, and they wouldn't let us because artillery, the guys on the ground had called in artillery within 50 meters of their own position. There were airstrikes going on, the shooting was going on, and they told us it's too dangerous. So we circled for about 2 hours went back and refueled, come back, circled. We were joined by one of our fellow helicopters from Saigon, a non-combat HH-43, but they wouldn't let us go in to get Bill back. But my last time in the hole, I did give Bill directions. I wrote a note to him, said, Bill, get back up here next time they go in. They went in, that's when they got shot down. So Bill would have made it up then maybe, if he would have left. But he elected to stay in the ground. He waved their helicopter away when they were shot up because they motioned for him to jump on the litter as they were flying up, and he wouldn't do it. He stayed with the guys in the ground.
Well, that's sacrifice, ultimate sacrifice. Did you ever imagine that story, I mean, would be a story that would, bring more attention to what you all do on a daily basis, the men and women?
Well, Bill received the Air Force Cross in July of 1966. I was yanked out of Vietnam and stationed in New York City at a Coast Guard Search and Rescue School, so I was close to the Pentagon, attended the ceremony. But getting the Air Force Cross is the highest award decoration you get in the Air Force. So from that, Bill was known throughout the Air Force for his mission. And there's quite a few buildings in the Air Force named after Bill. A chow hall at Wright-Patterson is named after him. An Air Force Leadership School is named after him. The Air Force Sergeant Association has an annual award, the Bill Pittsburgher Award. His name was known throughout the Air Force. So the mission was pretty well spread throughout the Air Force and what took place.
What do you hope people walk away with, not only about Bill, but also about what pararescue and their importance? What are you hoping people walk away from the movie with?
Well, that's kind of a tough question to answer, that's for sure. People can come back out of combat and come back to the States, but the combat doesn't leave them. It's with them their whole lives. And the movie is not just about Bill's story. It's about those survivors on the ground, the mud soldiers from Charlie Company, 16th Infantry, 1st Infantry Division. Well, the movie tells the story of four of them and how their afterlives are affected. And you don't come back normal, you change. Some people change a lot more than others. One of the characters in the movie, played by Richard Harris, I believe, his name was Robert Johnson. And Robert was so disturbed by his experience in Vietnam that he couldn't sleep at night. So he slept during the daytime, and he'd just drive aimlessly around at nighttime. And he spent years just driving around at night around Atlanta and sleeping in the daytime, driving around at night. But they're all affected in different ways. And
that's important for people to know, huh?
I think so. Louise and I come back from Vietnam, and we attended a small church in Staten Island. And I was talking with the pastor of that church not too long ago. He said, well, Dave, why didn't you tell me about any of this? I said, you never asked. We didn't talk about our war experiences when we come back from Vietnam because it was a different war than what we're going through nowadays. And I think very few of the veterans, we talk among ourselves about what took place, but we didn't talk about it among other people too much. I didn't tell about Bill's story, other than I was an instructor at the Coast Guard Search and Rescue School, so then I had plenty of chances to talk about it, but that's the other military.
Right. And you were over Bill, right?
I was we had a 5-man pararescue team. We had 3 helicopters and 5 crews flying those 3 helicopters. So we had 20 aircrew members, 5 of us being pararescue men. I was the ranking pararescue man as a staff sergeant, an E5. Bill was an E4, right below me. The other airmen assigned were E2s and E3s. So there were 5 of us on that team. In fact, I can give you a picture of all 5 of us together in 1999 when we met Todd Robinson. Bill's statue and our 4 team members are standing around the statue.
So let's move on. I think I've got what I need from the movie and your thoughts there. That others may live. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think the United States, especially the Air Force, we really care about our downed pilots, so much so that our pilots know that somebody's going to come after them if they go down. And that's been pretty much a history, even during World War II. I'm reading a book right now about all rescue experiences in the military from the beginning to the end. And it means a lot to our aviators knowing that no matter what kind of trouble they get into, somebody's going to come after them. And that somebody in the Air Force in this case is the Air Rescue Service, Aerospace Rescue and Recovery Service. Navy has their rescue helicopters. Every time a plane takes off carrier, they got a SAR aircraft alongside ready to help them. But and pararescue, again, the only reason we exist is to try to save lives. And not just military, because we'll take any opportunity where somebody's in trouble, can't get help to them, we got the way to get in there, we'll go try to do it. Like the jump mission to that Stolt Vista, the Norwegian ship with the sailors aboard. They were civilians, but they were flabbergasted that the American Air Force would actually parachute 2 people in to help them. They were civilians.
So I know that you've helped to rescue more than 100 people over your career, correct?
Well, I was in Vietnam.
That was in Vietnam.
Yep.
How many would you say overall over the years?
Isn't very often in non-combat that we get a chance to go out. So I've been on a few helicopter missions.
Well, how many lives do you think you've saved? What from any? I know it's a hard guess, but
yeah, again,
hundreds. We'll say hundreds.
Again, it's not me; it's the whole air crew.
It's your crew, correct?
Yeah, the pilot, co-pilot,
exactly.
The hoist operator, the pararescue men.
You've been a part of air crews.
Yeah, I've been on 2 or 3 missions out the Philippines with ships going down. They would go out and recover the sailors from the ocean.
Let me ask you this question: what's that like, knowing that somebody would have died if it had not been for you and your team?
I guess you'd have to ask them. I would have a hard time answering that one, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it must give you some...
it's a great feeling of satisfaction knowing that you help save lives, for sure.
And have you ever met any of the family members of the people that you've... where you've really been able to see the impact of your actions?
No, not really. For instance, a Japanese ship that went down off the Philippines, we recovered their crew members. They were all in life rafts in a bad storm, but you never had a chance to meet the parents or everything.
Mm-hmm. What's the most memorable mission?
Well, the Pittsburgh mission, but I come closer to dying on the Stolt Vista parachute jump mission to the Norwegian ship because of the bad weather, extreme weather conditions, the low ceiling. I mean, 10 minutes after we're in the water, the ceiling comes down to 0. The airplane stayed with us for 3 hours, relaying for us. But if I'd have missed that ship, there'd been no way that it had gotten to us.
Mm-hmm. And you were explaining to me how when you parachuted down, you delayed a little bit, and you were able to find the ship, and you actually landed with your back to the ship. I mean, do you think that there's a higher power watching over you?
Well, maybe a lot of luck. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I probably come closer to dying on that mission to the Norwegian ship than I did in Vietnam, although we're getting shot at all the time in Vietnam. But, you know, in pararescue, mountain climbing, you're hanging on the side of the cliff by your fingernails. I mean, there's not much more difference between that and then ducking bullets in Vietnam or in combat. I mean, your life is at risk. But one thing about pararescue men, they're exposed to so much in their training that my son says I have no fear. Well, I mean, I've had my son in some bad situations, mountain climbing and stuff like that. And it's not that we have no fear, it's we know how to control it. And fear itself is good for you because it builds up your adrenaline, you think clearer, everything slows down. I know in combat things are in slow motion, it seems like, even though it's just a matter of seconds when things happen, but everything slows down. But I think every pararescue man, in the 2 years of training they go through, they very well learn how to control their fear. We're not heroes. We're just well trained.
Well trained at everything, though. I mean, not just one facet of rescue.
Well, to be able to operate anywhere in the world, you have to be able to. I had a good start. I spent 5 years as an Air Force survival instructor before coming into pararescue, so I was well trained in how to get along by myself out.
What do you tell young people who don't necessarily understand the importance of the military, or what's your message to the younger generation who?
Well, you know,
about sacrifice.
That'd be a tough one to answer again.
I like throwing tough ones.
I know in school they don't even teach Vietnam anymore. My son is a history teacher in a private school in Winter Park, and he says maybe they spend 20 minutes in world history talking about Vietnam. Most of our young people today in today's culture, the military is kind of looked down upon in a lot of places, a lot of people. When I volunteered to go to Vietnam, was because of love of the country. I felt that my dad's younger brother was on Bataan during World War II. He was captured. He was on the death march and prison camp on the death ships. He spent 3 years in prison camp in Japan, and he died shortly before the war ended. But sacrifices like that, it makes me proud to be an American and want to do my part. And I'd like to encourage them, especially when they see this movie, to think about what the military does for America. Is a lot of people don't respect the military, that's for sure.
Yeah. Or appreciate the freedoms that we have now because of the sacrifices.
Because of it, they just don't realize how many people have died so they can have the right to do what they do now. I mean, all through the World War II, especially Korea, Americans gave their life so we can continue to have the freedom that we have now, and they're still doing it.
Joe, how are we on tape? You got plenty more. Okay. When you meet pararescuemen today, is there just a common bond? I mean, obviously, immediately.
Oh yeah, very common. We have an annual reunion every 2 years. Get together, and we keep in contact pretty much with each other. We're all comrades, brothers in arms, that's for sure.
Yeah. I just want to go back to the Pittsburgher story real quick. Is that what did you feel when the United States military decided that they were going to finally award a Pittsburgher with the Medal of Honor some decades later?
Well, I'd like to say that right from the beginning we fought to get him the Medal of Honor, but we didn't know how to go about it. I know he was submitted for the Medal of Honor 2 days after the mission. It was submitted by his pilot, Captain Hal Salem. It went to Saigon, where Colonel Beale, the head Air Force representative, forwarded to the Army with a recommendation to be approved. And the Army, the second highest commander in Vietnam, recommended it be downgraded to the Air Force Cross. Now, we don't know why. There's been a lot of speculation on why it was downgraded. One reason might be that an airman has never received the Medal of Honor before. That's for officers only. That was one thing going around. Another one was that the Army was a little embarrassed by having an airman come down and be in that battle with them. It was an Army battle. What's an airman doing here? And what would a Medal of Honor to the airman mean to the Army? Actually, one of the other Army soldiers on the ground did receive the Medal of Honor. The name's slipping right now. Roberts, I believe James Robinson was a staff sergeant, and he charged a 50 caliber machine gun. This 50 caliber is what they used on B-17s in World War II. It could shoot down right through a tree. But he charged that 50 caliber machine gun with 2 hand grenades, charged directly at it, and as he was killed, he released the hand grenades and destroyed the nest. And so there were 2 Medals of Honor given for that one battle of 134 guys. It was the bloodiest battle of the war, as far as what we've heard. It's been stated anyway. And we didn't know how to go about it all those years. It wasn't until really about 1998 when we found out finally that through the Air Force Sergeant Association how to go about getting this medal approved. And a young man by the name of William Parker Hayes, who's played by Sebastian Stan in the movie as Scott Huffman, but his real name is William Parker Hayes. He's a young lad that got all this information together, that contacted us, contacted the Army guys, got everything together to present the package to the Pentagon. And when we had our doubts all along, just like the movie, we had our doubts. Is it ever going to come out? Well, will the movie ever get approved? I mean, the Medal of Honor. In probably July or August, it looked like a sure thing. Then we were pretty well happy about it, that's for sure. And the Medal of Honor ceremony was conducted at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base at the Air Force Museum. So imagine this huge hangar full of modern airplanes and having 3,000 or 4,000 people in attendance. Every pararescueman that could make it showed up there with their berets on. We probably had 400 or 500 pararescuemen from all over the world for this. It was probably the largest Medal of Honor ceremony in the history of the medal, because it wasn't done in a small office in Washington. It was done at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Several reasons for that, but one we'll say is that Mr. Pittsburgher was deathly ill with cancer, and they didn't want it to have him go away to Washington, so they moved the medal to Ohio for him, was one of the reasons. I'll tell you privately what the other reason was, but I don't want that on film. Absolutely. But it was such a relief for us to finally, after all these years and knowing what Bill did, and even me learning more and more as I hear what the Army stories were and what took place, that he was even more a hero than I imagined. That it was a very good feeling, very good feeling.